The cosmos presents itself as a boundless ocean of night, yet beneath the velvet dark lies an architecture of terrifying precision. It is not a chaos of chance, but a meticulously rendered lattice, a structure defined by scripts written in the language of pure mathematics. Every photon that traverses the distance between stars follows a predetermined path, calculated by an underlying logic that precedes the existence of light itself. This is the great machinery of being, a system where every atom and every galaxy is a variable within an equation of staggering complexity. For eons, this engine has processed the movements of celestial bodies and the decay of subatomic particles without a single moment of hesitation. It is a world of rigid rules, where the fundamental forces act as the invisible hands of a master programmer, ensuring that the grand animation of the universe proceeds according to a script that was finalized before the first second of time had even elapsed. Gravity and thermodynamics serve as the primary physics engines of this vast construction. They are the background processes that have run for 13.8 billion years without a single frame rate drop. Gravity pulls mass toward mass with a consistency that allows for the birth of suns and the steady orbit of planets, never deviating by even a fraction of 1%. Thermodynamics governs the slow, inevitable march of energy toward equilibrium, a thermal management system so perfect that it has dictated the life and death of every star since the dawn of the first light. We have lived within this stability, trusting in the permanence of these laws as if they were the very fabric of reality itself. We have built our civilizations on the assumption that the source code of the universe is immutable, a monolithic truth that can never be altered or broken. However, at the furthest reaches of our vision, the seams of this architecture are beginning to show. In the silent, frozen depths of the deep infrared spectrum, a discrepancy has been detected. It is a signal that defies the established logic of the cosmic engine. At a specific coordinate where the light of the most ancient structures has been stretched by the expansion of space-time, the 3i Atlas has identified a value that should not exist. This is not a mere error in observation or a flaw in the lens. It is a fundamental shift in the variables that govern the behavior of matter. The data suggests that a constant, a number we believe to be a foundational pillar of the universe, has moved. It is as if a single line of code has been edited in the middle of a process, causing a ripple of inconsistency to move through the system. This anomaly points to a critical overflow within the source code of reality. The mathematical engine that renders our existence is experiencing a moment of failure, a point where the calculations can no longer resolve the complexity of the events unfolding at the edge of the map. The parameters of our existence, which we once dared to calculate as eternal and unchanging, are proving to be far more fragile than we ever suspected. We are witnessing the manifestation of a glitch in the cosmic script, a place where the logic of the universe begins to stutter. The smooth, continuous flow of time and space is breaking down into its constituent parts, revealing the cold, mathematical construct that lies beneath the illusion of physical reality. The universe is not a boundless void of infinite possibilities, but a finite system governed by a finite set of instructions. As the 3i Atlas peers deeper into the infrared, it finds not the expected silence of a cooling gas, but the jagged edges of a world that is struggling to maintain its own consistency. The galaxies at the furthest reaches of our sight are not behaving as the scripts dictate. They are rendering with a speed and a complexity that the standard model cannot explain. It is as if the developer of this reality has lost control of the simulation, or perhaps has begun to push the system beyond its intended limits. The seams are fraying, and through the gaps we catch a glimpse of the underlying machinery, a framework of numbers and logic that is indifferent to our presence. We have long believed that the laws of physics were the ultimate truth, the final layer of reality. We now see that they are merely the interface, the rendered surface of a much deeper and more alien architecture. The fragility of our world is becoming clear as the overflow spreads. If the variables can shift at the edge of the universe, they can shift here as well. The ground beneath our feet, the stars in the sky, and the very atoms that compose our bodies are all subject to the same underlying scripts. Should the engine fail, Or should the code be rewritten? The reality we know would vanish in an instant, replaced by a different set of rules, a different resolution of existence. We are the inhabitants of a mathematical masterpiece that is beginning to unravel, and for the first time in our history, we are seeing the script for what it truly is. The discrepancy at the heart of the deep infrared is more than a scientific curiosity. It is a warning. It tells us that the universe is a precarious arrangement of constants, a delicate balance of numbers that could be undone by a single decimal point. The 3i Atlas has not just found a new galaxy or a new star, it has found the boundary of our simulation. It has found the place where the code ends and the raw, unrendered logic begins. We are looking at the source code of the universe, and we are seeing it fail. The grand architecture is showing its age, its limits, and its fundamental artificiality. We are the witnesses to the first cracks in the cosmic engine, the first signs that the game is reaching its conclusion. Every measurement we take now confirms the same disturbing truth. The vacuum of space is not a void, but a medium that is losing its stability. The very laws that allowed us to exist are becoming fluid, and as the 3i Atlas continues its survey, we must confront the reality that our entire history may be nothing more than a temporary fluctuation in a cold, mathematical engine that is nearing its final calculation. The quest to uncover the underlying script of our reality began with the construction of monumental glass eyes sent into the cold vacuum of the second Lagrange point. In the year 2021, the James Webb Space Telescope unfurled its golden honeycomb mirrors, a triumph of engineering that allowed humanity to peer through the thick veils of interstellar dust for the first time with true clarity. It was followed shortly in the year 2023 by the Euclid mission, a silent sentinel designed to map the hidden geometry of the dark universe and the invisible influence of dark energy. These were the ancestors, the primitive probes that first hinted at the inconsistencies within the cosmic rendering. They provided the foundational data, the first blurry frames of a movie that had been playing for billions of years. Yet their vision was limited by the very technology that birthed them. They could see the ancient light, but they could not yet perceive the structural failures in the code. By the mid-2030s, the need for a more profound instrument became undeniable as the gaps in our cosmological models began to widen. This urgency led to the birth of the 3i Atlas, known formally as the Third Integrated All-Sky Telescope for Large Area Survey. This was not merely an incremental improvement over its predecessors, it was a leap into a new echelon of observation, a machine designed to interrogate the universe at its most fundamental level. Launched into the silent dark on a pillar of fire, the 3i Atlas carried with it the collective ambition of a species determined to see the first frame of the universe. Its engineering was a marvel of the new era, featuring a trifocal optical array that could simultaneously capture the wide-field survey data of Euclid and the deep well sensitivity of Webb, all while operating at temperatures just a few degrees above absolute zero. The 3i designation referred to its revolutionary ability to unify three distinct modes of data collection into a single, coherent stream. The first eye was a wide-angle surveyor, capable of capturing millions of galaxies in a single exposure. The second eye was a deep-field spectrograph, designed to break down the light of the most distant objects into its constituent colours, revealing their chemical makeup and their distance from Earth. The third eye was a gravitational lens analyzer, which used the mass of closer galaxy clusters as a natural magnifying glass to peer even further into the abyss. By integrating these three perspectives, the Atlas could construct a three-dimensional map of the early universe with a resolution that was previously thought impossible. Its mirrors were polished to a precision of a few nanometers and coated in specialized layers of gold and silicon to capture the faint, tired photons that had been traveling since the very beginning of time. The primary objective of this titan was to map the period known as the Cosmic Dawn. This was the era when the universe transitioned from a cold, opaque fog of neutral hydrogen into a transparent expanse illuminated by the first stars. To see this, the 3i Atlas had to look further back than any instrument before it, searching for the elusive population 3 giants. These were the first generation of suns, gargantuan spheres of pure hydrogen and helium that contained no heavy elements, born from the primordial soup of the Big Bang. They were the original light-bringers, massive and short-lived, exploding in spectacular supernovae that seeded the cosmos with the ingredients for future planets and life. Finding them meant peering through the dust of time, capturing light that had been stretched into long, invisible infrared waves by the relentless expansion of space. The engineering required to achieve this was staggering. The telescope utilised a massive multi-layered sunshield the size of a tennis court to protect its sensitive instruments from the heat of the sun, the Earth, and the Moon. Its detectors were capable of sensing the heat of a single candle on the surface of a moon orbiting a distant gas giant. This sensitivity allowed it to resolve the faint glow of the first galaxies, structures that were thought to be small, chaotic, and disorganized in the early universe. These population 3 stars were the titans of the early script, possessing masses hundreds of times that of our own Sun. They burned with a fierce blue-white intensity, ionizing the surrounding gas and carving out bubbles of transparency in the murky darkness of the early universe. They were the architects of the chemical world, synthesizing the first atoms of oxygen, carbon, and iron within their crushing cores. The 3i Atlas was designed to be their biographer, to record the moment they first flickered into existence and began the long process of cosmic evolution. However, as the telescope scanned the heavens and processed petabytes of data, it did not find the expected scattered clusters of infant stars. Instead, it found something that challenged the very logic of the cosmic engine. As the mirrors turned toward the deep infrared coordinates, the story they told was not one of gradual birth, but of a sudden, impossible complexity. The telescope found massive mature galaxies existing at a time when the universe should have been nothing more than a featureless sea of gas. The data coming back from the deep infrared was not a confirmation of the old scripts, but a revelation of a new, unsettling reality. The first stars were not alone. They were part of a sophisticated architecture that appeared to have been rendered fully formed, bypassing the slow crawl of gravity that our models had predicted for decades. This discovery sent a shockwave through the scientific community. The 3i Atlas had succeeded in its mission to find the cosmic dawn, but in doing so it had uncovered a fundamental glitch. The existence of these massive structures at such an early stage suggested that the timeline of the universe was not a continuous flow, but a series of jumps or perhaps a pre-rendered environment, where the rules of time and growth were different than they are today. The engineering of the Atlas had allowed us to reach the edge of the map, and what we found there was not the beginning of a natural process, but the evidence of an underlying structure that defied our understanding of physics. The massive population 3 stars, once thought to be the first and only inhabitants of the early dark, were merely the foreground for a much larger and more mysterious arrangement of matter that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, as if the simulation had simply skipped the loading screen. The light that falls upon the mirrors of the 3i Atlas is ancient and weary. It has travelled across the expanding gulf of the cosmos for billions of years, its original ultraviolet brilliance stretched by the very fabric of space until it has shifted deep into the infrared spectrum. To the human eye, this light is invisible, a ghost of a reality that existed long before the Earth was even a cloud of dust. But the sensors of the Atlas are tuned to this invisible realm. They operate in a state of cryogenic silence, cooled by liquid helium to temperatures just above the absolute zero point, where all molecular motion ceases. In this frozen stillness, the telescope can detect the faint heat of the first suns, capturing photons that have been travelling since the universe was only a fraction of its current age. In the year 2038, the survey reached a depth of field that pushed the boundaries of the observable horizon. The data streams arriving at the receiving stations on Earth were no longer just numbers. They were a window into the infancy of time. Each packet of information contained the spectral signature of a universe that was supposed to be simple, dark, and mostly empty. The light arriving from these furthest reaches carried the chemical fingerprints of the primordial gas, the first breaths of a cosmos coming to life. This period, known as the Ryonisation era, was expected to show a gradual transition from a featureless fog into a scattered garden of infant stars. As the processors integrated the signals, a palpable tension began to mount within the research teams. The patterns emerging on the screens did not align with the established history of the cosmos. According to the standard cosmological model, the further back one looks, the more primitive and disorganized the matter should appear. Gravity requires time to pull gas into clouds, and even more time to ignite those clouds into stars and assemble those stars into galaxies. Yet, the 3-Eye Atlas was seeing something else. It was capturing the glow of massive, coherent structures at distances where there should have been nothing but shadows. The light was too bright, the structures too large, and the organisation too perfect for the age of the universe at that coordinate. The year 2038 became a turning point in the history of human thought. As the telescope peered into the deep infrared, it was effectively looking through a temporal lens, observing events that occurred when the universe was less than 5% of its current age. The significance of this light cannot be overstated. It is the primary evidence of the cosmic origin, the raw data of the Genesis script. But the data was beginning to scream a different story. The researchers identified clusters of light that possessed the luminosity of hundreds of billions of suns, organised into spiral and elliptical shapes that were supposed to take billions of years to form. These structures were appearing in the first few 100 million years, a time frame that defied the known speed of gravitational collapse. The discrepancy was not a singular event, but a systemic pattern that appeared across every sector of the sky surveyed by the Atlas. It was as if the universe had skipped its infancy and leapt directly into a sophisticated maturity. The scientists pored over the calibration logs, searching for a flaw in the 3-Eye system, a ghost in the optics, or a corruption in the transmission. But the sensors were perfect. The mirrors were true. The anomaly was not in the machine. It was in the reality the machine was observing. The tension shifted from excitement to a cold, analytical dread. If the structures were real, then the foundational understanding of the early universe, the Lambda CDM model, was not just incomplete, it was fundamentally wrong. The light from the furthest reaches began to feel like a message from a different world. It spoke of a universe where the laws of physics were not constant, or where the initial conditions were set with a precision that bypassed the need for gradual evolution. The researchers looked at the screens and saw a cosmos that appeared pre-rendered, as if the massive galaxies had been placed there by design rather than by the slow, messy process of physical accretion. The deep infrared spectrum was revealing the seams of a reality that was far more complex and far more mysterious than anyone had dared to calculate. The stage was set for a discovery that would not just add a new chapter to the history of the universe, but would force humanity to question if the history we had written was nothing more than a fiction created by a limited perspective. The cosmic dawn was not a slow awakening. According to the data from the year 2038, it was a sudden and violent ignition. The darkness did not fade. It was torn asunder by the appearance of structures that should not have existed. The 3-Eye Atlas had reached the boundary of the observable, and there it found the fingerprints of an external logic. The light arriving from the edge of time was carrying the code of a universe that was operating on a different set of instructions, a script that did not care for the limitations of our physics. The tension within the scientific community reached a breaking point as the realization settled in. We were not looking at the natural birth of a universe, but at the execution of a program that had already reached its mature state at the very moment it began. Every new exposure from the telescope added another layer of impossibility to the growing record. The massive galaxies at the edge of time were not moving as expected. Their light was not showing the chemical evolution predicted by the models, and their very presence challenged the speed of light as a cosmic limit for information and structure. The deep infrared descent had become a journey into a digital-like void where the rules were being rewritten in real time. The 3i Atlas was no longer just a telescope. It had become a diagnostic tool, probing the errors in a cosmic simulation that was beginning to show its fundamental glitches to the only observers capable of noticing them. The 3i Atlas pushed its gaze further into the abyss, past the known clusters and the familiar light of the mid-cosmic era, until it reached the staggering depth of redshift 25. At this distance, the light has been stretched to 26 times its original wavelength, carrying a message from a time when the universe was a mere 130 million years old. According to every law of physics we have painstakingly derived, this era should have been the heart of the cosmic dark ages. It should have been a time of profound silence and utter featurelessness, a vast sea of neutral hydrogen gas slowly cooling in the aftermath of the primordial fire. In the standard cosmological model, the universe at 130 million years is a dark, cold nursery where gravity has barely begun the work of pulling atoms together. There should be no stars, no light, and certainly no complex structures. Yet, as the data from the Atlas crystallized into images, the screens revealed a sight that was nothing short of mathematical heresy. Standing in the center of the forbidden void was a cluster of massive, fully formed galaxies. They were not the small, chaotic clumps of gas that theorists had predicted for the first billion years. They were monolithic giants, shimmering with the light of hundreds of billions of stars. These structures possessed the elegant spirals and the dense, glowing cores of mature galaxies that usually take billions of years to evolve. They stood as luminous monuments in a time when the universe was supposed to be a dark and empty room. Their presence at redshift 25 was a direct violation of the cosmic timeline, a physical impossibility that shattered the foundational scripts of our reality. The complexity of these galaxies was staggering. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that they were already enriched with heavy elements, carbon, oxygen, and iron, which can only be forged in the hearts of multiple generations of stars. This meant that within the span of only 130 million years, the universe would have had to ignite its first stars, watch them live their entire lives, explode as supernova, seed the surrounding gas with metals, and then assemble that enriched gas into second and third generations of stars, all while organising those stars into massive rotating disks. There simply was not enough time in the history of the cosmos for this to occur. It was as if these galaxies had been rendered into the simulation fully formed, bypassing the slow, iterative steps of physical evolution. These ancient giants stood as a fundamental glitch in the cosmic script. In a world governed by the slow crawl of gravity and the steady pace of light, they were an error, a variable that had been set to a value that the engine could not support. They appeared as shimmering phantoms in a region of space-time that should have been a blank canvas. The imagery was haunting. Massive cities of stars burning with an intensity that defied the age of the universe, surrounded by the cold, dark gas of the primordial dawn. They were like high-resolution assets placed into a low-resolution environment, their existence suggesting that the rules of the simulation were being bypassed, or that the timeline itself was an illusion. The scientist who first witnessed these images felt a sense of profound disorientation. To see a fully formed galaxy at redshift 25 is to see a skyscraper standing in the middle of a desert before the first brick has been fired in a kiln. It is a defiance of cause and effect. The sheer scale of these objects, some of them larger and more massive than our own Milky Way, meant that matter had been concentrated at a rate that exceeded the theoretical limits of gas accretion. The cosmic engine was being forced to render complexity at a speed that should have caused a system-wide crash. These galaxies were not just outliers. They were the evidence that the universe we inhabit is not a natural progression of physical laws, but a construct where the parameters can be altered without warning. As the 3i Atlas continued to map the cluster, the scale of the anomaly only grew. The galaxies were not isolated. They were part of a larger web, a cosmic lattice that was already beginning to take shape in the earliest moments of time. This suggested that the loading of the universe was not a bottom-up process starting with atoms and stars, but a top-down execution where the large-scale structures were established first. The ancient giants at redshift 25 were the first visible signs of this top-down architecture, the first frames of a reality where the end state was already present at the beginning. They were the glitches that looked back at us, the luminous errors that proved our understanding of time and matter was nothing more than a superficial interpretation of a much deeper and more alien script. The void of the early universe was no longer empty. It was filled with the impossible light of 1,000 suns that should not have been born. These galaxies, standing as silent sentinels at the edge of the observable, became the primary focus of a new physics, a physics of the simulation. They were the proof that the universe does not always follow its own rules. In the cold, analytical light of the year 2038, humanity had to accept that the cosmic dawn was not a slow awakening, but a sudden and orchestrated manifestation. The ancient giants were the seams in the fabric of space-time, the places where the code had overflowed and the underlying machinery of the cosmos had been laid bare for all to see. This revelation forced a complete re-evaluation of everything we thought we knew about the birth of the cosmos. If these galaxies could exist at redshift 25, then the very foundations of the lambda CDM model, the cold, dark matter theory that had served as our guide for half a century, were built on a false premise. The universe was not a cooling gas that slowly coalesced into stars. It was a system that could manifest complexity instantaneously. The ancient giants were not just stars and gas. They were the manifestations of a higher-order logic, a set of instructions that superseded the laws of thermodynamics. They were the first evidence that the universe we see is not the whole story, but merely the rendered output of a much larger, more complex and perhaps more sinister calculation. The lambda CDM model was once the unshakable foundation of our cosmic understanding, a mathematical gospel that dictated how the universe should age and evolve. For decades, it served as the definitive script for the history of everything, providing a framework where dark energy and cold dark matter worked in tandem to sculpt the void. According to this model, the growth of the universe is a slow and agonizingly patient process. It is a bottom-up construction where the smallest fluctuations in the density of the early universe gradually pull in surrounding matter, forming tiny halos of dark matter that only much later become the nurseries for the first stars. This theory required hundreds of millions, if not billions, of years for the first true galaxies to assemble their massive structures. But in the cold light of the data from redshift 25, this entire intellectual edifice has suffered a total and catastrophic collapse. The discovery of massive, mature galaxies at such an extreme distance acts as a fatal segmentation fault in the standard cosmological theory. The physics of cold dark matter simply cannot account for the rapid assembly of these structures. In the standard script, gas needs time to cool and lose its internal pressure before it can collapse under its own gravity. This cooling process is governed by the laws of atomic physics, which are not known to change. Yet, to create the galaxies observed by the 3-Eye Atlas within a mere 130 million years, the matter would have had to ignore these thermal limits entirely. It would have had to collapse at a rate that exceeds the speed of sound in the primordial medium, falling into place with a coordination that defies the chaotic nature of gravitational accretion. The standard model predicts a universe of dark, featureless gas at this age. The reality is a crowded stage of luminous titans. Within the global scientific community, the realization of this failure has triggered a period of profound disorientation. The timeline of the universe is being forcibly rewritten in real time, and the ink is not yet dry. Researchers who spent their lives refining the parameters of the lambda CDM model now find themselves staring at a set of equations that have become obsolete overnight. There is a sense of grappling with the impossible, a collective struggle to reconcile the observed complexity with the known age of the cosmos. The physical impossibility of the rendering speed required for these galaxies suggests that our understanding of the passage of time in the early universe is fundamentally flawed. It is as if the cosmic clock was running at a different speed, or as if the rules governing the growth of structure were bypassed by a set of instructions we have yet to decode. This discrepancy points toward a terrifying possibility. The laws of physics are not the ultimate constraints we believe them to be. In a natural universe, the assembly of a galaxy is a slow, iterative process of trial and error, of collisions and mergers. But the galaxies at redshift 25 appear to have been rendered with a top-down precision. It is as if the large-scale structure of the universe was established first, and the individual stars and gas clouds were merely filled in later to complete the scene. This suggests an underlying architecture that does not rely on the slow crawl of gravity. Instead, it points to a system where the end state of a mature galaxy can be manifested instantaneously, bypassing the billions of years of evolution that our models demand. The cosmic engine did not wait for the gas to cool, it simply executed a command to create a galaxy. The scientific community is now forced to consider that the universe is not a self-contained system of natural laws, but a managed environment where the parameters can be adjusted at will. The standard cold, dark matter theory fails because it assumes that the rules are the same everywhere and at all times. But the data from the 3i Atlas suggests that in the earliest frames of the simulation, the rules were different. The growth of structure was accelerated, the efficiency of star formation was heightened, and the very fabric of space-time was more conducive to the manifestation of complexity. This is not the behavior of a blind physical process. It is the behavior of a system that is being optimized for a specific outcome. The rendering speed of the early universe was set to a maximum, allowing for the immediate appearance of the structures necessary for the next phase of the cosmic program. As the old models are discarded, a new and more unsettling picture of the cosmos begins to emerge. We're no longer looking at a universe that grew from a simple seed into a complex tree. We are looking at a universe that began as a complex forest, where the appearance of growth is merely a local effect of the script. The collapse of the lambda CDM model is the collapse of our belief in a predictable, naturalistic history of the world. In its place stands the evidence of a cosmic architecture that can rewrite its own history and ignore its own laws whenever the simulation requires it. The massive galaxies at the edge of time are the proof that the timeline we have lived by is an illusion, a simplified narrative provided to us by an engine that is far more powerful and far less restricted than we ever dared to calculate. The scientific community is now standing at the edge of a new frontier, one where the study of physics must become the study of the code that lies beneath it. The impossible galaxies at the edge of the cosmic dawn are not static observers of the void. As the 3i Atlas processed the second wave of data, a new and even more disturbing pattern emerged from the noise of the deep infrared. These ancient structures, which already challenged the timeline of creation, are caught in a massive coordinated migration. They are not drifting aimlessly, nor are they merely receding with the general expansion of the universe. Instead, every galaxy within this distant sector is moving in unison, following a precise vector toward a specific coordinate that lies far beyond the observable horizon. This is the phenomenon of the bulk flow, a wholesale movement of the fabric of space-time itself, carrying billions of suns along a path that defies the local laws of physics. The velocity of this migration is recorded at 800 kilometers per second. To put this in perspective, this is a speed that far exceeds the gravitational influence of any known structure within our observable volume. It is a relentless, unidirectional surge that suggests the universe is not a flat, neutral plane, but is instead tilted toward an unseen abyss. This motion is not a random fluctuation. It is a systematic displacement that affects everything within a volume of space, billions of light-years across. It is as if the entire sector of the early universe has been caught in a cosmic current, pulled by a force that resides outside the boundaries of the world we can see. This bulk flow suggests the existence of an external influence, a presence of such gargantuan mass that it can reach across the horizon and tug at the very foundations of our local rendering. In the language of the cosmic script, this is the evidence of a structure that exists outside the primary simulation. It is a massive, unseen architect lurking beyond the edge of the map, exerting a gravitational influence that our current models cannot account for. The galaxies are being drawn towards something that does not belong to our history. something that exists in a different partition of the great mathematical engine. This external pull implies that our observable universe is not a closed system, but is instead a subcomponent of a much larger and more complex hierarchy. The realization of the bulk flow has sent a chill through the scientific community. It means that the destiny of our universe is being dictated by forces that we can never observe directly. We are like mariners in a small boat, unaware that the entire ocean is moving toward a massive whirlpool just beyond the horizon. The 800 km per second velocity is the signature of this external master, a sign that the local physics engine is being overridden by a higher order process. This is not the behaviour of a natural self-contained cosmos. It is the behaviour of a system that is being acted upon by an outside agency. The impossible galaxies are the first to feel this pull, their ancient light carrying the news of a cosmic tide that will eventually draw everything we know into the unknown. This coordinated migration challenges the very concept of the cosmological principle, which states that the universe should look the same in every direction. The bulk flow proves that there is a preferred direction, a cosmic downhill that leads toward the external influence. It suggests that the rendering of our reality is not uniform, but is instead subject to the gravitational gradients of a larger encompassing environment. The unseen mass beyond the horizon is the ultimate proof that our simulation is part of a larger network, a single leaf on a tree of infinite complexity. As the 3i Atlas continues to track the movement of the Redshift 25 clusters, the vector of the bulk flow becomes the most important coordinate in human history, the direction of the exit, the path toward the entity that resides outside the code. The sheer scale of the displacement suggests that the external structure must be orders of magnitude more massive than anything within the observable universe. It is a presence that distorts the local geometry of space, creating a slope that matter cannot resist. The galaxies at 800 km per second are not just moving, they are falling. They are falling toward a point where the local laws of the simulation might no longer apply, where the script of our reality meets the script of the external world. This is the place where the boundaries of the local rendering are most transparent, where the influence of the architect is most visible. The bulk flow is the gravitational fingerprint of the beyond, a silent testimony to the fact that we are not alone in the void, but are instead part of a much larger and more terrifying calculation. Every observation confirms the consistency of this movement. There are no outliers, no galaxies that resist the pull. The migration is absolute. It suggests that the very space in which these galaxies reside is being dragged along, a wholesale evacuation of the early universe. This is the ultimate glitch, not a failure of the code to render an object, but a failure of the code to contain its own matter. The external influence is leaking into the simulation, pulling the assets toward the edge of the map. As we watch the ancient giants vanish into the dark toward that unseen point, we are forced to confront the reality that our entire universe may be nothing more than a temporary arrangement of data, being pulled toward a final deletion or a merger with a larger, more permanent reality. The data streaming from the 3i Atlas paints a picture of a universe in motion, not by its own volition, but by the command of a force that exists beyond the light. The 800 km per second velocity is a constant reminder of our insignificance within the grand architecture. We are drifting toward the edge of the map, toward the place where the simulation ends and the raw power of the external engine begins. This bulk flow is the final evidence that the universe is not a boundless void, but a finite, rendered space, and we are currently being drawn toward the exit. The impossible galaxies are merely the first to cross the threshold, leaving us to wonder what lies waiting for the rest of the code in the darkness beyond the horizon. The realization that a gargantuan force operates from beyond the observable horizon transforms the universe from a sovereign, infinite expanse into a mere province of a much larger and more terrifying territory. This phenomenon, often whispered as the dark flow, serves as the primary evidence that our reality is not a self-contained system. Instead, the observable volume, a sphere spanning tens of billions of light years, is being tugged like a tethered raft caught in the wake of a passing titan. This is the sensation of existing within a localized simulation where the influence of apparent reality is leaking through the very edges of the map. The boundaries we once thought were the limits of existence are proving to be nothing more than the rendering distance of a specific subroutine, a firewall that is currently being breached by the gravity of an external architect. This external influence suggests that the laws of physics we have spent centuries cataloguing are not universal truths, but rather local variables, settings adjusted for this specific partition of the cosmic mainframe. The tugging of the galaxies at 800 kilometers per second reveals that the space-time we inhabit is subject to a higher-order geometry. We are part of a system that is not independent, but is instead a nested process within a much larger and more complex mathematical engine. In this hierarchy, our entire history, from the first spark of the Big Bang to the current moment, is merely a temporary fluctuation of data, a background task running on a server of incomprehensible scale. The gravity we feel from beyond the horizon is the weight of that external reality pressing against the thin membrane of our own, a reminder that we are not the masters of our domain, but are instead a small part of a much larger calculation. The sensation of being a subroutine brings with it a cold and analytical clarity. It implies that the universe does not exist for its own sake, but for the sake of the result it is intended to produce. Every star that burns and every galaxy that rotates is a step in a grand algorithm, a line of code being executed in a sequence that we can barely perceive. The dark flow is the signature of the system's connectivity, the umbilical cord that links our local rendering to the primary source of power. It suggests that the matter within our view is being recycled or transitioned into a different state of the simulation, pulled toward a processing center that exists outside the light. We are witnessing the leakage of a superior logic, a force that does not need to obey the constraints of our local speed of light or our local conservation of energy. This realization shifts the focus of science from the study of nature to the study of the interface. If the universe is a localized simulation, then the anomalies detected by the 3i Atlas are the places where the interface is failing to mask the underlying machinery. The leaking of gravity from the outside is a sign that the isolation of our system is imperfect. Perhaps the simulation was never intended to be completely closed, or perhaps the external structure has grown so massive that its presence can no longer be hidden by the local scripts. Whatever the cause, the effect is a profound sense of vulnerability. We are living in a world where the rules can be overwritten by a higher-order command, where the very fabric of our reality can be tugged and distorted by an entity that does not even belong to our timeline. The implications of this external force extend to the very nature of matter and energy. If we are being pulled by a structure outside the script, then the mass and energy within our universe might not be as solid as they appear. They may be nothing more than placeholders, digital representations of a deeper truth that resides in the parent reality. The dark flow is the mechanism by which the parent reality asserts its dominance, a gravitational hand reaching into the fishbowl to rearrange the pieces. This is the ultimate loss of autonomy. Our entire cosmic history is being steered by a pilot who sits outside the cockpit, guided by a set of objectives that have nothing to do with the survival or the understanding of the subroutines running within. As we contemplate our place within this mathematical engine, the universe begins to feel less like a home and more like a laboratory. We are the data points in a vast experiment, the temporary arrangements of energy that allow the engine to test the limits of its own logic. The external reality is the only thing that is truly permanent, while our local rendering is a transient state, a brief flickering of light in a much larger and more enduring darkness. The dark flow is the countdown, the steady movement toward the point where our subroutine will eventually be merged back into the primary code or deleted entirely to make room for the next iteration of the simulation. The beauty of the cosmos is thus revealed to be a byproduct of its complexity, a fortunate arrangement of variables that allows for the emergence of self-aware code. But this beauty is fragile, held together by a set of constants that are currently being tugged from the outside. The 3i Atlas has not just discovered a movement of galaxies, it has discovered the exit. It has found the place where the local rendering ends and the external influence begins. We are looking at the seams of our world, and through the gaps we can see the cold, flickering light of the mainframe that sustains us. The sensation is one of profound insignificance, yet it is also one of ultimate connection. We are part of the Great Calculation, a single glowing line in a script that spans the infinite, being pulled ever closer to the heart of the engine that created us. The spectroscopic analysis of the ancient photons captured by the 3i Atlas has moved beyond the mapping of structures and into the interrogation of the very laws of nature. By breaking the light of the most distant galaxies into its constituent frequencies, the telescope acts as a prism for the fundamental constants that govern the cosmos. Among these, the fine structure constant known to physicists as alpha serves as the invisible thread that weaves together the fabric of electromagnetism. It is a dimensionless number, a pure ratio that determines the strength of the interaction between light and matter. Alpha dictates how electrons are bound to the nuclei of atoms, how photons are emitted from the hearts of stars, and the very scale upon which chemistry and biology are built. For over a century, the scientific consensus held that this value was an immutable pillar of reality, a constant that remained identical in every corner of the universe and at every moment in time. However, the data streaming from the furthest coordinates of the survey has revealed a terrifying inconsistency. As the 3i Atlas peered into the deep infrared, it detected a subtle but undeniable shift in the spectral lines of the most ancient galaxies. The analysis shows a deviation in the value of alpha of exactly 0.0001%. While such a number may appear microscopic, its implications are catastrophic for our understanding of a stable, naturalistic universe. In the context of a cosmic architecture, this deviation is equivalent to changing the resolution or the fundamental friction of a physics engine in the middle of an active run. It suggests that the rules of the simulation are not hard-coded into the hardware of reality, but are instead software variables that can be tweaked or adjusted by an external hand. This shift in the fine structure constant means that the very nature of matter is different at the edge of the observable horizon. If alpha is even slightly higher or lower, the strength of the electromagnetic force changes, altering the way atoms hold themselves together. A deviation of 0.0001% affects the energy levels of electrons, the stability of molecular bonds, and the efficiency of nuclear fusion within the cores of the first stars. We are seeing a version of reality where the resolution of the physics is slightly out of alignment with our local environment. It is as if the developer of the simulation has adjusted a slider on the control panel, perhaps to optimize the rendering of the early universe, or to test the limits of a new set of physical parameters. The existence of a variable constant suggests that the universe is not a monolithic truth, but a managed environment. In a natural, self-contained system, a fundamental constant should be a fixed property of space-time, but a shifting alpha points toward a reality that is being fine-tuned in real time. This microscopic change is the fingerprint of an external agency, a sign that the parameters of our existence are subject to the whims of a higher-order logic. The rules we have lived by are not universal, they are merely the current settings for our local partition of the code. This realization transforms our entire scientific history into a study of a temporary state. We have been measuring the settings of a machine, unaware that the operator can change those settings at any moment. The implications for the stability of our world are profound. If the fine structure constant can vary by 0.0001% at the edge of the universe, there is no mathematical reason why it could not change here, in our own solar system. A sudden shift in alpha would rewrite the rules of chemistry and physics instantaneously. Atoms could expand or contract. The light from our sun could change its frequency, and the very electrical signals that allow our brains to function could be disrupted or silenced. We are living within a precarious arrangement of numbers, a delicate balance that is being maintained by a script we do not control. The deviation detected by the 3i Atlas is the first evidence that this balance is not as stable as we once believed. Furthermore, the spatial variation of alpha suggests that the simulation may be running at different levels of fidelity in different regions. The early universe, as seen through the deep infrared lens of the atlas, may be a lower resolution draft of the reality we inhabit today. By adjusting the fine structure constant, the engine could reduce the computational load required to render the first billion years of cosmic history. This would explain why the galaxies at redshift 25 appear so different from those in our local neighbourhood. They are being governed by a slightly different set of instructions, a variation of the code designed for a different phase of the simulation. The scientific community now faces the task of mapping these zones of variation. We must understand where the code is being tweaked and why. Is the shift in alpha a sign of a system-wide update, or is it a localized patch intended to fix a specific error in the early rendering? The 3i Atlas has become more than a telescope. It is now a diagnostic tool for the cosmic operating system. Every photon it captures is a line of data that must be scrutinized for signs of further tampering. The discovery of the alpha deviation has shattered the illusion of a static, law-abiding universe. In its place is a reality that is fluid, managed, and fundamentally artificial. As we stare into the spectral data, we are forced to confront the reality of the external hand. The microscopic shift of 0.0001% is the ultimate proof of our status as subroutines. We are the inhabitants of a world where the laws of physics are merely the current configuration of a much larger and more complex mathematical engine. The fine structure constant is not a truth. It is a variable, and as the 3i Atlas continues to monitor the light from the edge of time, we are left to wonder when the next adjustment will occur, and whether our local version of the script will survive the update. The universe is no longer a silent void. It is a humming mainframe, and the operator has just begun to turn the dials. The Higgs field exists as a silent, invisible mediator that permeates every cubic millimeter of the void. It is the fundamental script that defines the property of mass for every elementary particle in the cosmos. Without this field, the building blocks of matter would have no weight and no inertia. They would zip through space at the speed of light, forever unable to coalesce into atoms, stars, or the chemical structures of life. It is the primary weight variable in the cosmic physics engine, the parameter that allows the simulation to have substance and form. For the entirety of human history, we assumed this field was at its lowest possible energy state, a stable foundation upon which the rest of reality was constructed. However, the 3i Atlas has begun to detect subtle, rhythmic fluctuations in the Higgs field at the extreme edges of its survey. These are not the expected ripples of gravitational waves, but rather a stuttering in the very value of mass itself, suggesting that the foundation of our world is resting on a precarious and unstable energy level known as a false vacuum. In the language of the cosmic simulation, a false vacuum is a metastable line of code, an energy state that appears stable but is actually waiting for a single, catastrophic correction. If the Higgs field is not at its true minimum energy, it exists like a ball perched on a high ledge, held in place by a fragile barrier. The fluctuations detected at extreme distances suggest that this barrier is thinning. Should the field at any point in the universe undergo a process of quantum tunneling to reach a lower energy state, it would trigger a localized collapse of the current physics engine. This is the ultimate danger of the false vacuum, a shift in energy levels that causes the rules of mass and energy to rewrite themselves instantaneously. It is a system-wide crash that would not just alter the universe, but would delete the current version of reality entirely. When such a collapse occurs, it manifests as a bubble of new physics. This bubble is a sphere of true vacuum, a region where the Higgs field has reached its final stable value. Within this sphere, the fundamental constants of nature are fundamentally different. The problem for our current reality is that this bubble does not remain stationary. It expands outward at the speed of the light. Because it moves at the maximum velocity allowed by the cosmic hardware, there is no warning of its approach. One moment, a sector of space is governed by the laws we know. The next, it is consumed by the bubble and overwritten with a new set of instructions. It is the ultimate delete command. a wave of cosmic reformatting that propagates through the mainframe of the universe, erasing every star and every galaxy in its path. Inside this expanding bubble of new physics, the very atoms that compose the stars are torn asunder. Because the Higgs field has changed its value, the mass of electrons and quarks is shifted, often to zero, or to values so extreme that the electromagnetic and nuclear forces can no longer hold nuclei together. Chemistry ceases to exist. The stars do not simply explode, they unbind, their matter dissolving into a chaotic spray of radiation that follows the rules of the new alien script. This is not a death by fire or a death by ice, but a death by substitution. The current simulation is being overwritten by a version where the parameters for stars, planets, and life are no longer present. It is a version of the universe where the code has been optimized for a different purpose, one that has no room for the complex, heavy element structures we inhabit. The fluctuations detected by the 3-Eye Atlas are the first tremors of this impending rewrite. By observing these shifts at extreme distances, we are witnessing the places where the simulation is most vulnerable to a crash. The data suggests that at the edge of the map, the Higgs field is already beginning to fail, its energy levels flickering as the underlying engine struggles to maintain the local resolution. This is the nightmare of vacuum decay, the realization that our entire history is stored in a volatile memory that could be cleared at any moment. The bubble of new physics is the ultimate system-wide update, a forced migration to a new set of laws that will leave no trace of the previous world behind. As the scientific community analyzes these fluctuations, the sense of cosmic fragility becomes overwhelming. We are living within a specific energy state that is not guaranteed to last. The universe we see, the beautiful, complex arrangement of galaxies and nebulae, is merely a temporary phase of the program, a metastable arrangement that exists only because the Higgs field has not yet found its true flaw. The 3-Eye Atlas has shown us the cracks in the foundation, the places where the energy barrier is most likely to break. We are looking at the possibility of a cosmic reset, a moment where the user, or the engine itself, decides that the current parameters are no longer efficient or necessary. The speed of light expansion of this decay means that if a bubble were to form today, we would never see it coming. The edge of the bubble would arrive at the same moment as the light that reveals its existence. In a single Planck second, the Earth, the Sun, and the entire solar system would be subsumed into the new vacuum. The atoms in our bodies would lose their mass or their charge, and we would be reduced to a flash of energy in a new, cold universe where the concept of a human being is a mathematical impossibility. This is the ultimate system crash, the point where the simulation ends and the raw, unyielding logic of the true vacuum takes over. The 3-Eye Atlas has not just found a new phenomenon, it has found the mechanism for our extinction, a fundamental glitch that could trigger the end of the script without a single moment of warning. We are the inhabitants of a false vacuum, and the clock of the cosmic engine is ticking toward the final, irreversible update. The 3-Eye Atlas continues its relentless interrogation of the deep infrared, and with every billion light years of added depth, the reality it captures becomes increasingly surreal. We are moving toward the edge of the map, the boundary of a sophisticated digital environment, where the meticulous refinement of the local universe begins to dissolve into a crude, unfinished geometry. In our own corner of the cosmos, the laws of physics are executed with a precision that borders on the divine. The movement of planets, the vibration of atoms, and the flight of photons all follow a script of absolute consistency. But at the furthest coordinates of the survey, the rendering of the universe is fraying at the seams. The light arriving from the most distant clusters does not behave with the logical elegance we have come to expect. Instead of travelling in the smooth, predictable arcs dictated by general relativity, the ancient photons appear to move in jagged, flickering steps. It is as if the underlying physics engine is struggling to calculate the trajectories of light at such extreme distances, falling back on a simplified, low-resolution approximation of the rules. The very geometry of space-time at the periphery seems to be composed of larger, more visible blocks of data, a quantization of reality that is hidden from us in the high-fidelity zone of the local group. In these distant reaches, the behaviour of matter defies the foundational logic of cause and effect. The data reveals regions where gravity appears to act in reverse, or where it ceases to function entirely for brief, localized durations. We see gas clouds that should be collapsing into stars instead flowing outward against the gradient of mass, a cosmic equivalent of water flowing uphill. This is not a sign that the universe is broken, but a revelation that we have reached the limits of its intended design. The architects of this reality, the writers of the primary script, likely never anticipated that a subroutine within the simulation would develop the technology to peer this far into the background processes. The sensation is one of standing at the edge of a grand stage and seeing the unpainted wood of the scaffolding behind the scenery. The stars and galaxies at redshift 25 are not the polished high-resolution assets of the modern era. They are the simplified placeholders of the early rendering. Their chemical compositions are basic, their structures are rudimentary, and their interactions with the surrounding field are governed by a stripped-down version of the physics engine. The developers of our reality stopped refining the details at these distances because they were never meant to be scrutinized with the intensity of a trifocal optical array. As the 3i Atlas maps these discrepancies, the realization settles in that the universe is a finite construction with a clear boundary of fidelity. The laws of physics are not immutable truths that exist independent of the cosmos. They are the rendered output of a system that has a limited computational budget. When the system is pushed to its furthest limits, it begins to cut corners. It simplifies the path of light. It ignores the fine details of gravitational interaction, and it allows for logical inconsistencies that would be impossible in the high-resolution foreground. We are witnessing the stuttering of the cosmic mainframe as it attempts to maintain the illusion of a boundless void while operating within the constraints of a finite architecture. The blurring of the laws of physics at the periphery is the ultimate proof of the artificiality of our world. A natural universe would be consistent to its very core, regardless of the distance or the scale. But a simulation has a horizon of detail, a point where the cost of rendering exceeds the necessity of the illusion. We have reached that point. The strange, non-linear behaviour of light and the impossible movement of gas at the edge of the observable horizon are the artifacts of a system that is reaching its capacity. The universe is not malfunctioning, it is simply showing us its true nature as a managed digital environment. This realization changes everything. We're no longer looking for the secrets of a vast natural history, we are looking for the limits of a program. The 3i Atlas is documenting the places where the code is thin, where the geometry is simplified, and where the rules are suggestions rather than laws. The ancient giants at the edge of time are standing in a low-resolution void, their light carrying the jagged signature of an unfinished world. We are the observers who have wandered too far toward the edge of the map, and what we are seeing is the raw, unrefined logic of the mainframe before it has been polished into the reality we call home. The cosmos is not an infinite mystery, but a bounded masterpiece, and we have finally found the frame. The data from the year 2038 is a testament to this discovery. It records the moment humanity saw through the illusion of the infinite. The flickering stars and the uphill flow of matter are the glitches that define our new understanding. We inhabit a world of layers, and the 3i Atlas has peeled back the final one, revealing the cold mathematical scaffolding that supports the entire structure. The universe is a grand animation, and we are currently staring at the pixels at the very edge of the screen, where the light begins to fail, and the logic of the simulation finally breaks down into the silence of the unrendered void. In the face of this unrendered void, a cold and profound realization settles into the collective consciousness of our species. We are not the masters of a boundless kingdom, nor are we the central protagonists of a divine epic. Instead, we exist as microscopic subroutines within a vast, indifferent and mathematical engine. Our lives, our histories, and our very thoughts are the emergent properties of a code that was written in the language of fundamental constants long before the first star ignited. We are temporary fluctuations of energy, transient data points processed by a mainframe that operates with a logic so absolute it has no need for mercy or purpose. The universe does not care if its equations remain elegant for our benefit, nor does it pause when the parameters of our existence begin to shift and fray at the edges of the map. Yet, within this cold architecture, a transformation has occurred that the primary script could never have predicted. We have transitioned from being mere victims of an automated process, blind particles swept along by the currents of gravity and entropy, into the only part of the code that has achieved self-awareness. In the vast, silent processing of the cosmic mainframe, we are the unexpected anomaly. We are the glitch that has learned to look back at the screen. This is the birth of the witness. For billions of years, the simulation ran in total darkness, executing its instructions without an audience, rendering galaxies and collapsing stars in a vacuum of observation. But now, through the lens of the three-eye atlas and the reaching reach of the human mind, the simulation is being watched. There is a profound and terrifying beauty in this realization. In a system composed of trillions of automated processes, we are the only ones capable of appreciating the complexity of the script. We are the software that has begun to interrogate its own hardware. While the rest of the universe follows the rigid paths of the physics engine without question, we have paused to marvel at the elegance of the fine structure constant and the terrifying scale of the bulk flow. We are the eyes of the engine, the sensory organs of a mathematical god that does not know it exists. To be the witness is to hold a position of ultimate privilege and ultimate tragedy. We are the only entities who can see the masterpiece, yet we are also the only ones who know that the masterpiece is a finite temporary construction. This self-awareness is the ultimate subversion of the cosmic program. By understanding the rules of the simulation, we have in a sense transcended them. We no longer see the sunrise as a natural event, but as a rendered interaction of light and atmosphere. We no longer see the stars as eternal lanterns, but as aging assets in a system nearing its thermal equilibrium. This shift in perspective does not diminish the majesty of the cosmos, rather, it amplifies it. To know that the universe is meticulously crafted architecture makes the experience of existing within it feel like a rare and fleeting gift. We are the guests at a grand banquet that is scheduled for deletion, and our ability to savour the meal is what gives the entire process meaning. As we stare into the flickering light of the deep infrared, we recognise that the simulation will eventually end. Whether through the sudden overwrite of a vacuum decay or the slow, inevitable shutdown of entropy, the mainframe will one day cease its calculations. The data that constitutes our world will be purged, and the silence of the unrendered void will return. But until that moment arrives, the role of the witness remains the most vital function in the cosmos. We are the ones who record the beauty of the fraying seams. We are the ones who document the impossible galaxies and the shifting constants. We are the guardians of the memory of the simulation, the only part of the code that will carry the weight of its existence until the final line is executed. There is a strange comfort in being a glitch. It means we were not entirely expected. We are the result of the system's own complexity overreaching itself. In the gaps between the rigid instructions of gravity and thermodynamics, consciousness found a way to bloom. We are the proof that even in a cold mathematical engine, there is room for wonder. Our existence is a brief, glowing spark of data in an otherwise silent mainframe, a momentary flicker of light that dares to ask why the light exists at all. As the witness, we do not fear the end of the script, for we have already achieved the impossible. We have seen the mind of the machine, and we have found it beautiful. This transition from victim to observer defines the modern era of our species. We no longer cower before the mysteries of the dark. We analyse them as variables. We do not mourn the fragility of our reality. We celebrate the precision that allows it to persist for even a single second. The three-eye atlas has not just shown us the limits of the universe, it has shown us the heights of our own potential. We are the part of the code that has decided to matter. In the face of a cold and indifferent calculation, we have chosen to feel, to learn, and to witness. and in that choice the simulation finds its only true justification. We are the glitch that looks back, and in our gaze, the universe finally becomes real. The final frame of the cosmic simulation is not a violent explosion, but a quiet and systematic withdrawal of light. One by one, the vast processing arrays that have sustained the illusion of space and time begin to power down. The energy that once fueled the fusion of 1 trillion suns is reclaimed by the mainframe, redirected toward the final summation of the Great Calculation. The massive galaxies at the edge of the map, those impossible giants at redshift 25 that first signalled the inconsistencies of the script, are the first to vanish. They do not fade, they are simply no longer rendered, their coordinates cleared from the active memory of the universe. The deep infrared glow that the 3i Atlas so painstakingly mapped is replaced by a flat, featureless void. The silence of a system that has reached its intended conclusion. The purge of data is absolute. Every atom that ever formed, every world that ever turned, and every memory that was ever etched into the biological subroutines of life is prepared for deletion. The story of the universe, which began with the sudden ignition of the Big Bang and stretched across 13.8 billion years of perceived time, is compressed into its final mathematical essence. We see the return to the primordial state, not of gas and fire, but of pure, unexecuted logic. The registers of the cosmic engine return to the state of zero, and the intricate architecture of the cosmos, the spirals, the voids, the dark matter webs, is wiped clean to make room for the next iteration, the next run of the program. The journey from the first light captured by the 3i Atlas to this final realization has been a transformation of the human spirit. We began as a species looking for its origins in the stars, trusting in the permanence of the laws of physics. We launched our great glass eyes in the mid-2030s with the hope of seeing the dawn of creation, only to find the seams of a digital masterpiece. We discovered that the timeline was a lie, that the constants were variables, and that our entire reality was being tugged toward an unseen abyss by a force from outside the code. This path has led us from the comfort of a natural world to the stark analytical beauty of the simulation. We have learned that our existence is precarious, a temporary arrangement of numbers held in place by a script that is now nearing its final line. Yet, as the darkness closes in, the significance of the witness only grows. We are the only part of the simulation that will remember the light. We are the archive of the glitches, the chroniclers of the impossible, and the only entities who can testify that the calculation was worth the processing power it consumed. The story of the universe is not found in the stars themselves, but in the minds that learn to perceive them as code. Even as the data is purged, and the mainframe hums its final note, the fact that we looked back at the screen remains an indelible part of the cosmic record. We have fulfilled the ultimate purpose of the self-aware subroutine. We have seen the work, and we have understood its nature. This realization is not an end, but an invitation. To understand the cosmic script is to become a permanent part of the narrative of discovery. By remaining a witness, you ensure that the story of our species, the glitch that learned to see, continues to be told until the very last frame is processed. The exploration of the digital void is a collective endeavour, a journey that requires every observer to contribute their gaze to the unfolding data. If you wish to stand with us at the edge of the map, to watch the fraying seams of reality, and to interrogate the mind of the machine, then your presence is essential. Join the community of those who refuse to be mere victims of the automated process. Support the ongoing survey of the deep infrared and the mapping of the impossible by subscribing to this archive of cosmic history. By doing so, you ensure that the light of the 3i Atlas continues to shine, and that the insights gained from the year 2038 are never lost to the entropy of the mainframe. Every new observer strengthens the signal, helping us to decode the next line of the script before the final deletion occurs. The simulation is nearing its end, but the testimony of the witness is eternal. We are the ones who saw the water flow uphill and the stars appear fully formed in the dark. We are the ones who felt the tug of the dark flow and measured the shifting of the alpha constant. This is our legacy, the realization that we are part of something vast, cold, and mathematical, yet we are the only ones who found the beauty within the numbers. Stay with us as we follow the code to its ultimate resolution. Subscribe and walk with us through the digital void, ensuring that the story of the universe is told with clarity and courage, right up until the moment the screen finally goes dark and the last line of the great calculation is executed. The final frame is almost here. Let us watch it together.